Well, there we go. All right, so we sort of did introductions, which is the way that I was planning to start. Is there anything else that you would like to say about yourselves before we begin? No?
Hello,
Not.
Tim and Kathy, near Schenectady. Um,
Enjoyed wine tasting in Europe and thought we'd
Keep
try
it going.
try it more.
Yeah. And where all did you wine taste in Europe?
We did a little shop one in Paris. We didn't do a whole lot. We did it in Paris, and then a couple times I think in Spain and in Italy. We went out to a vineyard and did a lunch pairings tour of the
Yeah.
vineyard, family story thing outside. It was in the Umbria area,
Oh, great.
Montepulciano. Great.
Yep. Yes. And how about you, Barbara? Anything else you'd like to say?
Um, no, except that I'm sort of looking to these tastings to sort of elevate my own tasting.
Great.
Because I mean, if you just turn me loose in a wine shop and say buy something, it'll be some big fruit bomb, Old Vines Inn. And because I like those and they're usually reliable.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I'd like to learn some more.
Okay. Great. Well, as you know, we're doing so if you like Cabernet kind of tasting tonight. And I want to start out with, I don't want to assume that you love Cabernet, but I am kind of assuming that you at least are familiar with Cabernet and like it if you are at this particular tasting. So I'm going to ask what it is that you like about Cabernet Sauvignon.
Mhm.
I tend to like a drier wine. Um, and a friend told me that there's something about the Cabernet grape that's particularly good for your heart. So it's like,
Oh.
there you go.
I am not a huge red wine fan, although I developed more of a palate for it. Um,
Okay.
and so that's probably so I'm not sure exactly it seems to me Cabernet is a little smoother than some red wines, but I could have it mixed up with other red wine. I'm not that in tune with exactly what a Cabernet tastes like.
Sure.
But I'm working on expanding my palate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I tend to like red wine in general, like I said, the Old Vines Inn, that kind of thing. The Cabernets I've had that formed my opinion about them seemed an awful lot like work. I
Say
mean,
more about that.
well, it was like I felt like I had to wade through layers of I don't even know what I would say, but I couldn't immediately appreciate the tastes that people would talk about.
Mm.
And so I would be sipping it thinking, okay, I know I'm supposed to be liking this.
Yeah.
And I would try very hard to do that.
Okay.
But it just felt like hard work. I mean, I don't go to the total other extreme to a fruity Merlot kind of thing. And some people would even say my Zinfandel preference is pretty amateurish. But some of the Cabernets I've had have not been smooth or full flavor. They just seemed like work.
Yeah. So Cabernet Sauvignon in itself is a super interesting grape. It's the world's most popular variety, red grape variety. And is grown all over the place. Just, you get the Napa style, you get the Bordeaux blends that on the left bank of the Bordeaux especially tend to be Cabernet heavy. It's in Italy, it's in Australia, it's in Chile, it's all over the place. And it does a lot of different styles. So even if you're drinking Cab from California, a lot of the things that American audiences have had are either like fruit bombs or oak bombs. So they're either like super, super fruity, like even like almost to the point of a Zinfandel, or they're really tannic from all the oak, and they're kind of what wine people say is overly extracted. So they like really like beat the heck out of the skins, and like in the skins is the is what's called tannin. That's the stuff that dries out your mouth, and it's in all plant matter. It's how plants defend themselves from bugs and insects before they're ripe. And it's like sour and drying, and it keeps all the pests away. And people sometimes like it, especially in Cabernet in that kind of drying way, but some people do not. And you talked about.
And I think it was that overly tannic that you described more intelligently than I did. That was what made me not enjoy the cabs I've tasted.
Right. Yeah, and a little bit of that tannin, I think, helps with meaty dishes, with steak and things like that. It balances out kind of that umami kind of taste that's in steak, but too much of it is controversial. So I will say that like that is not something that I love personally, that like really dry Cabernet. One producer that makes that style is Duckhorn, and all of the Duckhorn companies, they all have names that have to do with ducks, and they're all related. Decoy, Duckhorn, Canvasback, and they make a very dry, sort of leathery Cabernet that tastes to me like what I imagine dry shoe, like dirty shoe leather would taste like. But people love it and pay $100 a bottle for it. So taste is subjective. But anyway, Cabernet remains really popular. I do like I have a bottle of Sebastiani Alexander Valley Cabernet sitting here that is one of my favorites, that's done in a little more Italian style. So it's a little more fruit forward. The tannins are a little more balanced. Yeah. So, but on the whole, Cabernet it's a dry wine, obviously. So people who like dry wine tend to like Cabernet. It's full bodied. So it feels like you're drinking something. It feels substantial in your mouth. It's medium high in tannin usually, unless you beat it up when you're extracting it, or unless you have it on a lot of oak, which also has its own tannins. It is medium to high in acidity, so it balances food really well, and it ages really well. So the acidity and the tannin give it the structure that it needs to age. Those things both sort of cut down with age. So if you have a cab that's 5 or 10 years old, it will be a lot more pleasant to drink than a cab that is a year or two old, generally speaking. And some of them can last 30 or 40 years. But they have to be quite tannic and quite acidic to make it that long. And so they're really unpleasant to drink when they're young, if they're made to last that long. So, and they're also fairly high in alcohol, which plays well to an American audience, which tends to like a higher alcohol level. In Europe, those tend to be blended and less extracted, so that the alcohol level is a little lower, but they tend to be 13.5 to 15% alcohol, which is fairly high. Bold flavor, ageable, lots of black cherry, black currant, anise, other spices, tobacco. You often think of Cabernet as having what's called pyrazine, which is a sort of green peppery flavor to it. But tonight we are not talking about Cabernet Sauvignon. We are talking about things to drink instead of Cabernet Sauvignon. So So we're going to start tasting some wine, but I wanted you to have an idea of sort of what people are looking for when they want something that is similar to a Cabernet, but different. So we're going to talk a little bit about acid and tannin and different fruit profiles and things like that. So as we're tasting this first wine, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about how to drink wine, how to taste wine, not how to drink wine. You can probably figure that out on your own. But so the first thing, I'm going to start with the Nebbiolo, and I've got this Paredes Longue Nebbiolo in front of me. Mine is 2020. Did I see that you got the same wine on that one?
I think so.
Yeah.
Paredes Longue Nebbiolo, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So the first thing that you're going to do with your wine is look at it. And it is evening, so we're having, it's the light is probably not quite as good, but if you have a white piece of paper or a light surface, you can sort of see what color the wine is. And wine ranges from, some of it is sort of straight on red. It's a ruby, kind of dark but straight red. Sometimes it goes more toward purple. Sometimes it has a little bit of brown or orange in it. And so we talk about wine in gradations of color. What do you think your Nebbiolo is?
Kind of it's wine colored. A reddish with a little bit of a violet hint to it. It's lighter in color than we thought it would be, and looks lighter than yours, even though they're the same wine. But
Yeah, mine is in weird lighting. It is quite light. It's just hard to see. So
Almost
uh,
like all
and
over.
I can look through this. If you look through your glass, if you're looking at like a piece of paper with writing on it and you put your glass on it and you look through, in this wine, you can see the writing.
Mhm.
Quite pale in color, and it's got a little bit of an orangish tint to it. And the rim around the wine, if you're looking at it, if you turn the glass at a 45-degree angle, you can see that it's got sort of a paler colored rim to it.
Yeah.
This grape has quite a pale color. And sometimes that orangey color means that it's aged, but in this case, it just means it's Nebbiolo. So there you go. So then you're gonna swirl the wine around in the glass a little bit and take a big whiff and see what you smell.
oh. Kind of a berry of some sort, kind of a smell.
Okay.
It's not overpowering.
No. So this is the process of smelling wine is a series of sort of yes and no questions. So the first question is, are these aromas, like, can I smell them easily? Like if I held the glass like this far from my nose, can I smell them? And this wine is a no on that.
Right.
If I hold it here, can I smell them? Yes, I can do that. And especially if I give it a good swirl, I definitely get aromas. So this is sort of a medium intensity aroma. You said some sort of berry. So the yes or no question is like, is it raspberry? Is it strawberry? Is it cherry? I mean, the first question would be, is it red fruit or black fruit? So if you talk about a berry, there are red berries, blackberries, and blueberries. Which sort of way down that chain are you going to go?
You need more berries than I do. You know.
Well, it's not strawberry. I did it.
Yeah.
No.
I lean towards raspberry.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely get raspberry from this, and red cherry, like a tart cherry. which is pretty typical of Italian reds specifically. They often have sort of sour or tart cherry taste to them. Cabernet tends toward the black fruit area on that train. They go black currant, blackberry, black raspberry, black plum. Nebbiolo goes red, so it's more sort of raspberry, red cherry,
Mhm.
cranberry. There's a little cranberry in this.
Yeah.
Those sorts of like tart red fruits. I'm also getting a little floral to this, and that's pretty typical of Nebbiolo too, is to smell like a little like rose, and that increases as it ages, but this is pretty young. So just like dried rose and dried spices, dried herbs.
Like cinnamon or.
Mhm. And this has got some anise to it too, I think, and a little bit of like leatheriness. All right, so we're gonna take a little sip and get it all over your mouth when you sip. Like try to make it touch as many taste buds as you can. What are you tasting?
I expected it to be sweeter than
Hmm.
it is. Partially because of the smell.
Mhm.
It's I get some tartness with it, certainly.
Yeah, tart is what I'd say.
Yeah, and this is if you're tasting a lot in the same day, or you're tasting as a professional and like going through 50 wines, like I sometimes do at trade events these days because of now my life, like taste 50 wines in a day, then you would spit. But I am not spitting tonight because I am going to drink you through this for fun. So cheers. But I do have my little spittoon thing here just in case. Yeah, so you might choose, so if you are a Cabernet drinker, you like Cabernet, or you know someone who likes Cabernet, you're trying to get them to expand, you might choose this because it's also very dry. Nebbiolo has very high tannins, naturally somewhat more than Cabernet. It's a thick-skinned grape, and thick-skinned grapes have more tannin than thin-skinned grapes in general.
The second sip was gentler than the first.
Yes.
Maybe because I was like, whoa, this is different.
Yeah, because you're expecting a somewhat sweeter taste to it, but it is very dry.
Yeah.
This Heredis is bone dry. Yeah. Pretty high acid.
Mhm.
Uh, the way that you
Burn.
the way you tell acid in wine is you take a sip, you swish it around, either spit or swallow it, and then you hang your head forward and wait to see how much saliva gathers in your mouth. It's very charming. If you watch a sommelier competition, they'll actually do it with their mouth open and like drip saliva on the floor. It's really great. I do not subject people to that.
Right.
We all look very elegant when we get together and wine taste as like people in the industry, doing all kinds of funny things. Trying to taste like, is it fruit tannin or is it oak tannin? Which you tell by where it is in your mouth. Like fruit tannins are in the front of your mouth, and oak tannins usually hit on the roof of your mouth. Yeah. So this you might have with, you could drink this with beef, with steak, similar to a cab. You could have this with something that's sort of fatty and rich. Things like truffle risotto is really great with Nebbiolo. Like rich cheese, the butternut ravioli is really awesome with Nebbiolo. And if you're ever like, Nebbiolo is sort of the star of northern Italy in terms of grapes, and this is the budget friendly version, the Langhe version, but they also use Nebbiolo to make Barbaresco and Barolo. And Barolo is one of the most valuable and prized wines in the world. That is Nebbiolo that has seen at least 3 years in an oak barrel in the aging. It comes from a specific area, so it chills out the tannins and the acid a little bit
Mhm.
and adds a little bit of body and texture to it. Yeah. But if you get a Barolo, you should decant it
Mm.
because it's been in the bottle at least 4 years at that point by the time it gets released, and it needs air.
Mhm.
So what do you think of your Nebbiolo experience so far?
Yeah, I would drink this again.
It gets friendlier as you drink more.
Yes, no, it definitely did.
Yeah.
It also is really great with food. I mean, that acid profile is really fantastic with food. So, all right. So now we're gonna move on to our next wine. I'm gonna do the Bourgogne next, the Cab Franc.
Oh.
What did you get for a Cab Franc?
Well,
Did
Where
you
I
get a
went-
Cab Franc?
that
Did you get a Cab Franc?
I did, but where I went, the only one they had is a New York State Cab Franc, which you had said was in the note was better to get European.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what it is like because they are making better and better Cab Francs in New York and in Canada. Yeah, so I'll be curious, but
Cayuga Lake specifically.
okay. Yes, I'll be curious about it. We'll talk about that as we go. So, all right, so we're going to walk through the sort of tasting steps. So we're going to look at our wine. And what do you notice about it that might be different than the first wine?
Well, this is lighter.
Yeah, lighter in color.
Mine is more purpley and not as clear as yours.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Playing from Barbara's Galaxy S20.
Yeah, Cab Franc tends to be more on the purple side, not quite as dense, not quite as opaque as Cabernet Sauvignon, but not quite as pale as the one that you have usually.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, yours is definitely darker.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's a big difference.
yeah. It's a pretty big difference. I'm super interested in the wine that you're drinking, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right. So we're gonna swirl it around, take a smell, see what you smell.
Not as strong.
No.
Mm-mm.
Almost like a pine tree.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that totally makes sense. But yes,
I mean, there's definitely berries in there. Again, it's not as strong of a smell as the.
no. So typical profile for Cab Franc is sort of fruit profile would be typically more red fruit, more raspberry strawberry kind of flavors, a sweeter sort of cherry, red plum. It also has a distinct like herbaceousness to it, sometimes leaning toward juniper in cold climates. So that pine tree thing did not surprise me when you said that. So usually more sort of like dill, thyme, rosemary kind of smells. Often a little bit of that same like green pepper, pyrazine kind of smell as Cabernet Sauvignon. And pencil lead is the sort of distinguishing smell and taste for Cab Franc is graphite or gravel. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take a drink and which is hilarious. Now that I mean, I may just have said this and like spoke it into being, but mine is extremely pencil leady. Very. Not in a bad way, just. Woo. So mine is a French. Bourgogne is on the northern side of the Rhone or of the Loire River in the Loire Valley. It's across the river from Chinon, which also produces Cab Franc. Chinon tends to do sort of lighter versions. They have sandy soil that produces a really light, very floral, very elegant and pretty Cab Franc. Bourgogne tends to have a more robust, bold flavor, and it's a little more rustic, shall we say. So hence the like overwhelming pencil lead situation that we have going on. And what does yours taste like? Is it dry?
I think it's dry.
It's kind of dry, and as I swallow it, that's when the berry flavor kicks in.
Okay.
It was weird. It just tasted pretty dry in my mouth, and then as I swallowed the wine and what lingered on my taste buds was just of that berry flavor.
Mm-hmm.
That was strange. It was like two flavors in one.
I noticed as I've been drinking it, the pencil lead smell is stronger. Not taste, but smell. Like I know it when you first said pencil lead taste, I thought,
You're like, what?
no.
And like, does pencil lead taste like anything? I don't know. I don't go around licking pencils, but it's like
yeah,
what I imagine pencil lead would taste like.
yeah. It's not very strong. I don't think the taste is very strong. It's kind of, I don't know, almost boring.
Interesting. Yeah, mine is definitely not boring. There's a lot going on in
Yeah, on
this.
the lookout for that for a real one now. Try hard.
It's similar to Cabernet Sauvignon. Like the typical Cab Franc is, well, it's actually, first of all, it's the parent. It's one of the parent grapes to Cabernet Sauvignon. So they crossed Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc to make Cabernet Sauvignon, which is very unexpected. Like you would not expect Sauvignon Blanc to
Right.
produce this like very intense red grape situation, but the plants are really similar, and the sort of the skin thickness and things like that are really similar on them. So interesting variations. And I don't think anyone did it on purpose. Like some crossings were on purpose, but I think that was a natural crossing
Yeah.
that they just kind of found somewhere.
Mhm.
And Cab Franc is also like the parent grape to Merlot and Carmenere. So it's an old grape. But you might use this. It's dry like a Cabernet Sauvignon, at least usually. I recently had a local Cab Franc that was fermented to an off-dry style, so it had a little sweetness to it. How much do you know about fermentation? Should I explain this?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of whoever might watch this in the future, so you can ferment any grape to a greater level of sweetness by stopping the fermentation before all of the sugar is eaten, because alcohol comes about by the yeast eating the sugar. So if you stop the fermentation, the alcohol will be lower and the sugar will be higher. So that is what they've done in this local Cab Franc that I tried recently, which was not my style at all, but God bless her. It's this woman winemaker down here who is just a lovely lady who makes wine that I do not like, that I wish I did.
It's got oils in it because it's just creeping down my glass.
Yep. This is I wonder what the alcohol is on this. Yeah, this is a 14% that I've got here. I don't know what your alcohol content is, but it gives it quite a bit of body when it's that high.
3.
What is it?
12.3.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not as sweet as I thought it would be coming from Cayuga Lake.
Sure.
No.
Yeah, 12.3 means it's probably just like a hair off dry.
Mhm.
Although Cab Franc does tend to be lower in alcohol anyway, tends to run between 11 and 13.5 instead of the 13.5 to 15.
Mhm,
The
mhm.
Cab Sav does. You might choose this instead of Cabernet Sauvignon if you were having a somewhat lighter meal, where Cab Sav goes better with steak and burgers and things like that. This goes really well with lamb or duck.
Mm.
Or I recommended a very similar wine to this to a friend who was making carbonara this week because the high acid in it balances that sort of unctuousness of the carbonara, but also will play with the bacon, will stand up to the bacon in it.
Yep.
We have yet to hear how that went, but I hope it was good. All right, what do you think of your Cab Franc?
I want to look for some from Europe and compare it.
Yeah. And there are more and more decent domestic versions, like California versions, and Washington State. Washington's making some really good Cabernet Franc right now.
Mm.
So, yeah. All right. So now we're gonna do the Aglianico. Did you manage to find an Aglianico?
No, that's not the Rioja, right? Obviously.
No, that's the other Italian.
No, I couldn't find that. And so what I got was a Montepulciano.
That'll work.
Because I knew what that is.
Fine. So Montepulciano will be a little different because it is from that's from central Italy. So you sort of get Nebbiolo in the north, you get Montepulciano and Sangiovese in central Italy, and then you get Aglianico in southern, along with some other, I mean, there are 3,000 grape varietals in Italy, so you get all kinds of things there, but that it might be what you get. The sort of top of the height of the grape varietals in southern Italy. Aglianico is the most likely to be made into sort of in versions that are expensive and valued and age worthy, as we say about wines that can be kept for a long time and get better with age instead of worse. Although some versions of Montepulciano also can do that. So
Go ahead.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask, part of what was challenging while looking for the wine is, at least the store I was in, which was the Route 9 discount liquor wine place, which has a lot of European wine, or more than other places around here. But they don't organize things according to what kind of grape it is. So is there a clue to how to shop that way?
Yeah, so I had actually written a post on my blog about like how to shop for wine at one point that was like how to figure out what your wine store is even doing, because, well, I shouldn't say there's always an organizational scheme, because there sometimes isn't. And sometimes the person who owns the store does not, like, there's not good enough management to even have an organizational scheme. But most of the time, there's some kind of scheme, even if it's just like European reds are over here.
Yeah, that was kind of what.
Yeah.
That's kind
By
of how
country. Just
by country, and whites are together and reds are together. Although then sometimes you can find wines from other countries in other places, by title, but not by grape name.
Yeah, because like we do all of our domestics by varietal, because that's how they're identified in the US. So grape varieties in the US are identified by what variety they are. And so that's how they're organized. But in other countries, they're not identified that way necessarily. So in France, it is illegal to put the grape variety on the bottle in most of them, except in Alsace.
Really?
And yeah. They've made some exceptions recently for wines that are only distributed in an American market. Those can have variety on them, but they never label variety in France, except in Alsace, which is like half German. So, yeah, and
So what
Italy,
does the label say? Just the vineyard name?
it says the region. So it says the area, like the geographic area that it comes from. And you're supposed to know what that means in terms of what's in the bottle. So yeah, it's very French. so you get this bottle and like mine says Bourgogne on it. Like it's like, here's this producer, Bourgogne. It said nowhere on the bottle does this say that there's Cabernet Franc in here. I just happen to know that red wines that come from Bourgogne are Cabernet Franc. Yep. And red wines that come from Chinon are at least 90% Cab Franc and some other mixture of things that I will never be allowed to know.
Hmm.
So. And similarly in Italy, like they label usually by the region, although sometimes you get the grape on it, like Langhe Nebbiolo is a Nebbiolo from Langhe. This is Campagna Aglianico. But you can also find Aglianico that's labeled Terrassi, which is often the most expensive, and you're just supposed to know that Terrassi means Aglianico. And Brunello di Montalcino, for example, is Sangiovese. It just is. So is Chianti.
Okay, there's a lot of that at this wine.
And Montepulciano comes from Abruzzo, usually, or some area in, somewhere around there. So you'll get Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. But yeah, there's a whole other, the area called Montepulciano actually makes Sangiovese. So yeah, slightly confusing. Anyway. That is why people study wine, as I have taken up doing, because it takes long courses and tests to figure out what in the world you are doing.
Right.
And to advise people who walk into a store and go, I don't know, I want some kind of red wine. All right, so we're gonna dig into some Italian red of your choice. So what is yours looking like in terms of color?
This is much darker.
Yeah, kind of purpley.
Nice. Deep red highlights.
Can you see through it at all?
Not really.
Little, but yeah, no, I mean,
Can't read through it.
yeah.
So just a little bit of transparency. My Aglianico has no transparency to it at all. It is like nearly black, and it's like I could if I dropped a coin in there, I would lose it. It's dark. Yeah. So what are you? If you give it a swirl and give it a sniff, what are you smell? What are you smelling?
Licorice?
Okay.
Like a dark cherry.
Yeah. And spices.
Yeah.
I like the smell.
Any spices you can identify?
Maybe cloves?
Mm-hmm.
More than that, maybe. Good smeller.
Yeah.
Mine is distinctively black cherry. Like the black cherry is like coming off the glass. And then as you get closer, there's black plum. There's quite a lot of white pepper to this. Quite a lot of like sort of a gaminess, some sort of spices. So there's some clove here. There's a little smoke, I think.
Hmm.
Super interesting. This is what year are you? Oh, 28. Mine's a 2018, so it's got a little bit of age on it. Interesting.
Oh, 21.
Okay. So, all right, cheers. Drink up.
Hmm.
And this is the opposite. This was fruity going in, but then very dry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
And the saliva is coming forward.
Yeah. Very high
Roll for
acid.
you.
Yeah. Of the three, I think I like it the best so far.
Yeah. Montepulciano tends to be a really accessible grape, so I'm not surprised by that. This Aglianico is it tastes much like it smells. It's like really black cherry. It's very powerful. So if you're used to the sort of big flavors in a Zinfandel, for example, or I mean, it's not quite as like jammy as Zinfandels can be, because Zinfandel can be, if they leave it to ripen or a long time, which they often do, it can be a little like cooked fruit, and this is more like fresh fruit, but it's very powerful in flavor. Big fruit bomb, but with a little more complexity to it. And Zinfandel doesn't have to always be that way either. It can be, one of the problems with Zinfandel is that it doesn't ripen evenly. So the grapes, you have some that are turning into raisins while others are not ripe yet.
Okay.
So depending on where you choose to pick, that produces a totally different character. Yeah.
But this sounds like, based on what I have liked in the past,
Mhm.
this might be a nice thing for me to try.
That's what I was thinking, is like, if for a Zinfandel lover, these Southern Italian reds are really great options. In fact, they have a Zinfandel twin in Southern Italy called Primitivo. And it's a wine controversy. There's a debate about whether they are the same grape or not, because they are so genetically similar, but they can't trace them back to a common root. So they're nearly identical genetically, but probably developed independently, but taste very much the same. So Primitivo is great and tends to be a little more of that cooked fruit jam kind of taste to it. This is more sort of tart fresh fruit, but fruit bomb for sure,
Yeah.
in the best of all the ways.
Does the soil influence the flavor of a grape? You could have the same grape variety, but grown in different soils. How much will that impact?
Yeah, so I've been studying a lot about this, actually, because there was recently a study done on whether grapes, how directly the soil impacts the grape, because wine people have for a long time talked about how they can tell the soil type when they taste wine. And European sommeliers are trained to identify soil type rather than grape varietal. So they have strong feelings about terroir, specifically the soil. And there's been this kind of prevailing idea that the grapes are somehow taking in the character of the soil. But the studies that have been done recently say that's not possible. It's not possible for plant matter to actually take in the content of the soil. So I think this is all kind of a moot point because my own take on it is that plants, whether they're actually taking in the content of that soil or just existing in those conditions, are affected by the conditions.
Mhm.
So there is not really any question that Chenin is a lighter bodied wine than Bourgogne. They are the same grapes. They are grown 5 miles from each other. And the only difference is that in Bourgogne, they have limestone soils, and in Chenin, they have sandy soils. And sandy soils produce lighter bodied wines than limestone soils. Like,
Right.
that's just what it is. So, and when you get grapes that are grown on in a coastal area, the sandy soil that those grow in, they tend to be very light bodied. Coastal wines tend to be very light bodied. They tend to have some salinity to them, but although people argue about whether that's like, is there actually salt on the grapes or is it from the soil? Like, especially in Europe, they don't wash the grapes before they press them. So like there is soil, there's salt on the grapes. It's fine. But yeah, so there is impact. There's just argument about why there's impact
Mhm. Mhm.
in the kind of soil.
Yeah, well, when we were in the winery in Paris, they brought us into the soil room and they would,
Mhm.
show 8 different kinds of soils and
Yep.
made a big deal about that.
Well, and anyone in Burgundy, particularly, particularly in like, or north of Burgundy, like in Chablis, if you tell anyone in Chablis that their soil doesn't matter, they have the most famous soil in the world. They have Kimmeridgian soil, just
Yeah.
chalky soil with oyster shells in it that are like prehistoric oyster shells ground up in the soil. And they will tell you all day long that that is why the grapes grow the way that they do. So
Mhm. Okay.
who am I to argue
Right.
with Grand Cru Chablis makers? Yeah. But this, so Aglianico, southern Italian, it's affected by the warmer temperatures of southern Italy. So it tends to be fuller bodied. You get sort of more of a ripe fruit flavor, where mid and northern Italy, you're going to get a less ripe, less sort of cooked texture to it, more tartness. Yeah.
Mhm.
This is Montepulciano is such a flexible grape. So you have Montepulciano, which you can have with anything,
Mhm.
especially tomato-based sauces and anything that's got a little acidity to it. Yeah, Aglianico is good with if you are an eater of game dishes like venison. It's amazing with venison or anything like that, or bison or whatever. It's really great with barbecue because it's a little smoky. So
Mhm.
anything that came off a grill or a fire, it's really good with that. And Aglianico, in my opinion, is really good for savoring like a good scotch.
Mm.
Like consumed entirely alone around a fire in the cold.
Right, right.
You should look.
Yeah. So I hope that you get to find an Aglianico at some point because they are delightful. Is it obvious that I'm enjoying my Aglianico a little?
Yeah.
I love them. I drank so much Aglianico in Greece, where it is also prevalent, because it's just such a like big, full-bodied wine that also has complexity to it. All right. Speaking of big, full-bodied wines, we are moving on to the Rioja. Did you find a Rioja?
Yes.
What do you got? Oh yeah, Cunei. Yep, great, good choice.
I guess.
So I have a Carloceras. It's a Crianza level. So
That's what this says too. Yeah.
yep. So talk a little bit about what that means. So Tempranillo is the grape that is used in Rioja. They can sometimes use small amounts of other things for blending, but it has to be at least 90% Tempranillo, and usually is 100%. If it doesn't have necessarily any oak aging to it, it's called Joven, Joven, and it's just sort of a light-bodied, fruity, easy drinking wine. If it's a crianza, it's required to have at least 6 months of oak aging to it. So they tend to be a little more structured, a little fuller body, a little richer. Then from there you go into a reserva or a gran reserva. So reservas have to have 12 months on oak and 12 months of bottle aging before they're released. And gran reservas have to have 18 months of oak aging, and they have to have 3 years of sort of sitting there being aged in bottle before they can be released. So Spain is, so here's an interesting difference between France and Spain. France tends to, as soon as their wines are fermented and aged in barrel to their satisfaction, they like to release them. And they expect you to know whether you're supposed to drink them immediately or age them. So you can buy a Bordeaux that is a year and a half old, but you're supposed to know that you should not open that bottle. Like, do not, that you're baby killing, as people call it. And that that it will be bad for you and the wine if you do this. In Spain, they are a little more careful about what they want the consumer to have. So in Spain, they will not release the bottle to you until you are meant to drink it, or until at least it is good enough that they're proud of the quality that you're going to experience. So you're not going to get Riojas until you can drink them. And that doesn't mean you can't age them, because you can, but a Crianza level is meant to be drank now. So that's what we're going to do. Yeah, so what does this look like?
This is the deepest color of
Yeah.
any of the ones we've had.
Yeah.
Purpley.
Burgundy. Got just a little, mine's got just a little bit of browning to it from the oak aging. But mine's also got 2 years on yours, so might be that too. Because red wines, as they age in bottle, tend to lose intensity of color and turn more brown. White wines, as they age in bottle, turn darker.
Yeah.
So don't ever buy a Pinot Grigio that is orange or brown, because they're not meant to age in bottle.
That doesn't even sound good.
You can buy a really good Riesling that has started to turn kind of brown, but you can buy it. But if a Pinot Grigio starts to turn that way, it's really terrible. All right, what do we smell?
Fruity.
I was saying it's less fruity than the others.
Spices.
Is it
Floral.
red fruit, black fruit, or blue fruit?
I'm getting more black fruit with this.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Tempranillo tends to be more toward the red fruit, but can go either way. Can go sort of that blackberry raspberry line,
Yeah. I was thinking raspberry.
and like black cherry red. Is it black cherry? Is it red cherry? Maybe both.
Yeah.
Why not both? Riojas also tend to smell like cedar, tobacco, dill. Dill is a tell on Rioja. if you're doing blind tasting, you smell dill really clearly. They do not have the sort of the pyrazines, the green pepper kind of flavor that you get from a Cab Sav or a Cab Franc. Instead, they have sort of an herbaceousness that leans into the dill. Go ahead and take a drink. This, I think, is the most similar to a Cab Sav, to what I would expect from a Cabernet Sauvignon. And I think that has a lot to do with both that sort of black fruit, red fruit character, that it walks that line that Cab Sav can also sometimes do, and the oak aging, because you get a lot of that, like it's a little vanilla, a little sort of clove-y, some like leather, tobacco, that cedar taste. Those are all like signs of oak aging, which is really common to Cabernet.
Yeah, this is smoother. It's not as, it's less bite with this than some of the others had.
Mm,
This is not as tart.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, the Spanish reds tend to be not like like Italian reds tend to be very tart cherry.
Yeah.
And they pair well with Italian foods, which tend to be a little more either like creamy or acidic.
Mhm.
And those sort of tart wines go well with those foods. This goes really well with more like northern Spanish food, which tends to be a lot of beef, a lot of lamb, mutton. Um, yeah.
This is now my favorite of the four. I like it.
But I'm glad that you can have multiple and change your mind. You know, you can enjoy
got you.
multiple wines and change your mind as you go through.
It could be because it's fourth glass of wine.
Right? Let me ask you what you like about it.
There's a smoothness to it, and the flavors are more blended. I don't know if that makes sense, but with the others, I felt like there was one taste and then another taste, and these,
Yeah.
they travel. I mean, there's a change, but it's subtle and gradual instead of as sudden as the others.
Yeah.
And
This
it's got a fuller taste than.
This is a very balanced wine, and I have had the wine that you're drinking and can say that also is like, that's an exceptionally balanced wine. So I walked you through the like how to taste wine steps with like appearance and nose and palate, but I didn't get to the fourth step, which is to assess the quality of the wine. So we have been not assessing our quality throughout this. And there's an acronym for quality assessment. The acronym is BLIC, B-L-I-C. And so you have to think about balance, length, intensity, and complexity. So balance, sort of, are these flavors in harmony with one another? Is what's there, is something overwhelming everything else, or is it coming together well? Length is how long the pleasant tastes linger in your mouth after you have swallowed or spit. So, you know, take a slug and see how long it sticks around.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, even if I open my mouth and talk, I can still sort of feel it. I can still taste that, especially on the back of my tongue in a positive way. This has a long finish on it. The intensity of flavor, like I would probably rank this, I have to take tests on this. So like I probably would rank this as like a medium plus intensity. It's not blowing my face off with flavor, but it's definitely got a lot to it. It's not lacking in anything. And in terms of complexity, it's not the most complex thing that I've ever tasted, but it does have what we would know as primary, secondary, and tertiary flavors. So it has primary flavors come from the grape directly. Secondary flavors come from the winemaking. So those are like the oak aging things that are going on here, the sort of flavors of like the vanilla and the dill and all that coming out of the oak aging. And it also has tertiary flavors, which are flavors that come from aging. The tobacco, leather kinds of development, and a little bit, like this is getting to be a little bit of cooked fruit. So if it's got character in more than one area of flavor, then it would be rated as complex. And so this is a pretty excellent wine. So you rate the quality of wine based on like how many of those characteristics it has. So in all those characteristics would be an outstanding wine. And this is, yeah, I would say that my last two would qualify as outstanding. The other two were very good.
Yeah. I mean, after tasting them and seeing how the different flavors will kick in over time. Have you seen the show Hot Ones on YouTube?
No.
It's,
Oh yes,
he interviews famous people and he makes them eat hot wings, progressively hotter.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Some of the hot sauces they talk about, it's like, it's like, oh, that wasn't bad, and then it's like, oh, here comes the heat now, and then and then a flavor change. It's just amazing how chilies or grapes can do that.
Yeah.
In the processing. So yeah, it's not just one flavor. Boom.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and rarely do you get the exact same thing on the nose and on the palate.
Yeah.
Wines often surprise me when I have smelled them, even though in the program that I am in, the study program that I'm in, they keep telling me that my nose should be telling me everything. And then I taste it and I'm like, nope, that is not true. My nose did not tell me everything about this wine.
Yeah. Like the first two, the Nebbiolo and the Franc, I got a lot of fruit flavors. I thought, oh, this is going to be sweet. And then it was like tart, but that was a real surprise.
Yeah. And Italian reds can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes for American wine consumers because of the tartness to them. And European wines sometimes are just a challenge for Americans because they're not as like fruit forward. So if you're blind tasting, that's one of the first questions that you ask is the fruit, what is driving the bus here? Is the fruit driving the bus, or is there something else driving the bus? And if the fruit is driving the bus, it's probably New World. It is American, it's US, it's South American, it's Australia, New Zealand.
Right.
If there's something else driving the bus, then it's Old World. Yeah. So, any questions about any of this?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We
So
just keep
the
doing these things. We gain appreciation each time we do
Right.
these.
Right.
Probably have to do tons of them before I consider myself
Yeah, but
real.
some of what you were saying, I remembered hearing elsewhere, so it's beginning to stick. But also, I thank you. I mean, I think your manner of explaining is very clear, down to earth. It's accessible. And
I appreciate that.
appreciate it.
Good.
Yeah, and I would say, even having come to this, not having been able to get to the store to buy wine today, I have learned a lot that's going to inform me when I do go to the store in a couple of days.
Yeah. Good. I'll be curious to hear what you get.
Yeah.
Oh, will I?
Yeah. I just want to go back and retry them now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So favorite wines, yours is the Rioja, Kathy.
Mhm.
Okay. Do you have a favorite, Tim?
Yeah, I would, in terms of just sitting back and enjoying a wine, that the Rioja was easy. And then the multi, how do you say that? Monte,
Montepulciano.
yeah, Pucciano. That was next.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, when we were in Spain, we were mostly in Galicia.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Galicia, and their their red wines weren't great.
Yeah.
I drank a lot of Albarino.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
white.
Yep.
Uh, I think when we were in Madrid, we had a little bit of Rioja, but not very much.
Yeah.
Just wasn't what was served where we were most of the time.
Right.
Yeah, we never really
But
got
this is
over
good.
there.
Galicia, you more often see Monastrell,
Mm.
which is in France it would be Mourvedre, um, and it can be really great, but it can also be like not good. So
Yeah.
there are some that are there are some Monastrells that I really love. Like Monastrell is a very full-bodied, like very flavorful grape. And if you do not handle it gently, it becomes too much.
Mm. Yeah, and we weren't drinking top of the line
No.
wines in Spain. On the Camino del Santiago, they plop a bottle of wine on your table, and it's the house.
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to do that if it's really good. But after the second glass, it tastes great.
In that case, Albarino is the safe choice.
Right. Yeah.
Because I've had a lot of Albarino and I've had some really great Albarino, but I've never had a really terrible Albarino.
Mm, okay. Yeah.
You know, I've had lots of mediocre Albarino.
Mhm.
But like the worst I've had was mediocre. That's fine. I can deal with that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming
Okay.
tonight and being part of my very first open
Yeah.
to the public crazy class. Thanks for being the guinea pigs.
All right.
Is there, do you have a website? Is there a place like we could post reviews or
Yes.
comments about this?
So you can, the best place to do that right now is I just opened a new Facebook page today, and I'm going to put that link in the chat in just a second. I'm not good enough to have a Google listing yet, apparently.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, you
or-
gotta have enough hits.
yeah. Yeah, I couldn't even find myself on Google when I searched my business website. I was like, this is very discouraging. I put like my entire name and all the things I wrote. But yes, but Facebook will take reviews.
Right. Okay, we got it.
All right, thank you so much.
All righty.
All right.
Thanks
Thank you.
again, and cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.